Hi, I'm Naomi from Dropping Designs, and this is video 2 out of 3 for the basic MCN tutorial, and this one it focuses on doing your elastics. Alright, so I've finished sewing it together now. You can see I've got my little turnout gap at the front there. I just thought I'd mention it now in case you're wondering. The reason that I sew with the shiny pull up is because these little teeth in your sewing machine that grip the fabric and move it forward, they can better grip onto the micro fleece than the pull, which tends to just slip around. Also, I don't really want these sharp little teeth grabbing and pulling at the waterproof layer on my nappy, so I try and keep it away from that. Now what we're going to do is sew on the elastic. I always sew my elastics onto the outer of the nappy, so the side that's going to be on the outside. And that just helps you get nice rolling in elastics, which helps prevent wicking. It doesn't matter so much when I'm doing the 2-layer pulls, and you'll see why in a minute. So if I'm doing a minky outer, I'll sew it to the minky. If I'm doing a pull outer, I'll sew it to the pull. Now what you want to do before you start is mark out your elastic points according to your pattern. Now because this is my pattern, I'll just put the elastics wherever I want. No, it's not. No, that's not like that at all. I know where the elastics go because I've done this pattern many times, and also because I cleverly have lined up my elastic points with snaps. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4 snaps in, and that's where I start my elastic, and my leg elastic will also start on that opposite that as well on the wing. Now I use this 10mm braided elastic. You can also use Lastin if you like, but I prefer the braided. Just like the way it looks better in your nappies, and quite frankly I find it easier to sew with. I wouldn't go too much smaller than a 10mm either, just because particularly when you're using minky in a nappy, it's not anything smaller isn't really strong enough to pull it back and get that nice springy elastic that you want. So I'll put that on. Now the first thing you have to do is anchor your elastic on. So you line that up in your seam allowance, slip down, and you just want to keep your elastic as close to the seam, to the hem that you've sewn as possible. That helps you get the nice roll out as well. If you sew it too far away, when you've got a bigger seam allowance, you might find it rolls the other way and just generally goes all feral. Keep pulling my elastic out there, stick it back in. Now again we need to change our stitch. So for me, I have a stitch 8, which is my triple zigzag. If you have a look there, that's what your 3-step zigzag is that everyone's talking about. That's your normal, that's your 3 steps, so you can see how that's a dashed line. So that's stitch 8 for me. We do say to do it as wide as you can. I know from experience that if I choose the 5 stitch length, the stitches go off my elastic constantly. So I use a 4, and that gives me nice coverage of the elastic without jumping off either side. And you do use the longest stitch length that you can. So for me that's a 5. Now you want to anchor your elastic in. There's various ways of doing that. You can do your back and forth sewing again. You can do a straight stitch at each end of your elastic just to hold it in place. I do my normal anchor stitch, and then I do 4 stitches. That's before I stretch. Now that I've done that and I know that the elastic's in place there, and because the elastic's not stretched, those stitches aren't going to have any tension on them, so they'll hold it in place. I pull my elastic, I pull it firm, but I don't pull it as tight as it can go. So if you see, it's kind of like pulling it as firm as you can and then slackening off a bit, but I just pull it firm and keep that same tension the whole way rather than trying to go like this every time I have to readjust my elastic. So we pull that in, we keep the edges close to that line of stitching as possible, and then off we go. And then we readjust as we go. Now I'm not sure if you can see there what my backhand is doing, but as that's coming through, I'm holding the elastic taut on the other side. So basically you're holding it taut on both sides, keeping it taut so that it sews nicely. Because if you let that go, it's just all going to bunch up and your sewing's going to go back and forward and it's not going to look very nice or spring nicely at all. Now I've gotten back to my 4th snap here, so I do 4 stitches again with the elastic unstretched, and then my lock stitch. And then I take it off and I trim the elastic. So as you can see here, I'm using this rather large roll of elastic, and I don't pre-cut my elastic, I just do it straight from the roll. And if your pattern does specify to use a certain elastic length, I'd be more inclined to go, okay, measure say 20 centimeters and make a mark on your elastic, because otherwise when you get to the end of your elastic, your 20 centimeter piece that you cut, you're going to be holding on to that last centimeter trying to finish off sewing your elastic, and it's just not going to work very well for you. So that's one side done, the back done, sorry, and I always start with the back. I just find that it's easier to do the back before I've done the side elastics and then to do the side elastics after, and you know, do it whatever works for you. No one's going to come around and smack you on the wrist with a, you know, dodgy MCN making ruler or something like that. Maybe if you try to sell them and they're dodgy, I don't know. So there we go, I've just locked that one in. Now on the curves it's rather tricky because you can't really, you know, it's really hard to get your elastic and everything matching up. So what I do, pull the elastic straight like this, go a few stitches, adjust. And then you go now we're onto the straight. And the majority of my elastic areas on my pattern is straight because, well, let's face it, it's easier. But also because this is a one size fits most pattern, I find that having it all the one width, i.e. straight throughout, means that it's a lot trimmer when it's snapped down to the smaller sizes. And there we are at the end of my elastic. And we trim again. Now with doing your second leg, some people are used to this idea that they have to have the hem on this side and they'll sew it like that. And if you're new to making MCNs, you're probably just going to do that. What you actually want to do is put your fabric on this side. And so from here, I sewed from the back to the front of the nappy. I want to sew from the back to the front of the nappy again on this side. And what that does, it just makes your elastic a lot more even. It's hard to really describe in words what the difference is, but trust me, if you do one each way and you put them next to each other, you'll see exactly what I mean. It just gives a nicer look. It seems that by sewing it the same way, it kind of causes the elastic to gather in the same way, if that makes sense. So your nappy doesn't look kind of lopsided. So I'm just having a bit of trouble getting that in there. And look, it does take a bit of getting used to, but once you do it a few times, you'll be fine. So just, if you can, I'll turn this around a little more to make sure you've got the back of my hand in there and you can see what I'm doing there. So see how I'm just keeping that taut as I go. And again, keeping it really close to that seam line. And if a couple of odd stitches go over that line, I don't worry too much about it, no one's going to see it. And just finish it off again. And anchor. And cut. And oops, get my hand out of the way. There's our elastics all done.